Hey guys, welcome back to another Rome Let's Play video. Oh my gosh, that was terrible. Anyways, welcome back. It's really been a while, partly because it took a while to actually be able to get this right for recording, and then two, because of our 2 week hiatus for AP testing, something that I think you guys will have to be dealing with sometime later. So, um, So this week, or basically starting with this week, we're going to be getting into the actual narrative. There's going to be some review in a couple slides about what has been leading up about the weeks before this, but now we're actually getting into the actual story that I wanted to tell. So this from now on, it's going to be much more, I guess, character driven than before. So last week, we ended with the fall of Carthage in 146 BCE, and we're starting here today. So, if the people in the live lecture didn't remember who Scipio Aemilianus was, but he was that Roman general, the young Roman general, who'd done a super good job in Spain. He'd fought a guy in single combat in front of the whole army. He'd been the first one over the walls and assaulting an enemy fortress. And he was just an extremely talented and extremely popular officer, which led him to be assigned to command of the Third Punic War, as in the war that would defeat Carthage. That's the city that in 2 wars led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Romans, and that nearly destroyed the Roman Republic itself. At this point, though, Carthage was not really a major power, so this whole campaign against Carthage was mainly motivated by greed. But here's the important thing. Fall of Carthage, traditionally, though in reality it's much more complicated, is basically the date at which it's said that Rome has achieved dominance over the Mediterranean, where Rome is that undisputed superpower. And so let's get back to the actual fall of Carthage itself, because while Scipio Aemilianus watches from atop his hill with his historian buddy Polybius, and cries as he watches the city burn, there's a young officer who's wading through the corpses in the streets. Who's wading through the ash and the corpses, burning houses, things like that. This young officer is Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus. He's a 19-year-old officer from one of the most powerful families in Rome. He's the son of a two-time consul. Remember, the consuls are like the one-year presidents. Only there's also two of them, but they're essentially the executive branch of Rome. And so he is from an extremely well-connected family, and he's one of the nobiles. If you remember, the nobiles are where we get the word noble from, because they are the upper class, or the very, very upper class of Roman society. And the whole reason why Tiberius is actually on this campaign is because he's Scipio Aemilianus' brother-in-law. His sister is married to Aemilianus. So he's he's very much a rich kid, and considering what he does later, this is actually a very surprising or a pretty ironic background for who will eventually be the main character for our first couple of weeks. So he is also extremely talented, which is quite a surprise. And he was actually, or he was possibly, the first soldier over the walls of Carthage when the attack began. And remember, that is an extremely dangerous job, because usually the first guy to get over the walls is also the first guy to come into the sight of all of the archers. So he's quite courageous. So where do we stand here in 146 BCE? So now Rome is the undisputed ruler of the Mediterranean Sea. it's just defeated Carthage, the big bad enemy for good, but it's also conquered the rich Greek East, which is the old Greece and Western Anatolia, or Western modern, okay, the western part of modern Turkey. So that is an extremely rich area. That means that there's a huge amount of wealth that's just flowing into the Republic. Remember, though, the Republic being wealthier overall doesn't mean that most people live in better conditions. Because remember, Rome's whole system, its political and economic system, heavily favors the rich. Remember, back in the days and back in the first week of this class, I talked about the principle of timocracy, where the Romans believed that the people with the most property should have the most voice in government and the most power. And money is really dominating the Roman political system. Remember, before there used to be this old patrician plebeian distinction. Remember, the patricians were the original, the OG of Rome. They are the old families. They claimed to be descended from the gods. They had rights to wear special shoes, special clothes. They also got special offices, and at the beginning of the Republic, they were the only ones allowed to hold very high offices, while the plebeians were everyone else. So who just wasn't part of that select group of families. So in this, it would include, the richest of the rich, or the richest of the rich, and also like, beggars on the street, all plebeians, and they were all cut out of a lot of political power. Remember, over the first couple hundred years of the Republic, the plebeians and the patricians had been, going at it, where the rich plebeians wanted access to power, the poor plebeians wanted some relief from being poor. But what eventually happened was that the patricians and the rich plebeians came to an agreement where the patricians allowed for the creation of the plebeian assembly. Remember, that is it's in the name, where they vote whether to they vote to approve laws, to turn senatorial decrees into laws, and also the tribunes of the plebs, which are 10 people who have the power to protect the plebeians. But remember, these now that these political, and they also open the top political offices to the plebeians. But now that the patricians and the rich plebeians, now that the rich plebeians have access to high office, now the rich plebeians and the patricians have much more in common than the rich plebeians have with the poor plebeians. So instead, what happens is that this new political class rises, the nobiles. This is the group that Tiberius Gracchus belongs to. And so the nobiles are, they can be either patricians or plebeians. They're an extremely small group of families that basically controls the republic. Remember, during the wars against Carthage, a small group of people started dictating most of state policy in order to coordinate this whole massive war. And the old plebeian assembly, as well as the tribunes of the plebs, they're dominated by nobile candidates, where most of the tribunes of the plebs are nobiles. They're very rich. They don't have that much in common with the poor, and so they're not really, most of the time at least, they're not really doing their jobs. While the plebeian assembly is starting to feel kind of cut out of power, because right now what's happening is that the Senate, remember the top, or like this group of 300 or so very rich old guys, right now the Senate holds a lot of customary power, where if you ever want to deal with a problem, you don't go to the assembly, you go to the Senate. And technically, the plebeians, they have all the legal power. They create laws. The Senate can only create decrees, which only get obeyed because of tradition. And so, sorry that I explained this rather poorly, but just remember that the plebeians theoretically have all the power, or the plebeian assembly theoretically has all the power, and the Senate practically has all the power due to custom. Also, remember, at this point, Rome has a period of massive income inequality because this small group of nobile families who are commanding the armies that are conquering Greece, they're getting extremely rich. There are generals who are coming home with tens of thousands of pounds of silver, thousands of pounds of gold. But most of the money is flowing towards nobiles and not really to everyone else. In fact, for most other people, they are getting cut out of the loop because they're getting cut out of this. Because remember, all of the soldiers fighting in these armies are farmers, and it's not exact. You can't exactly leave your home during the spring after finishing planting, go to Greece to go fight a like 10-year long war, and then get back before the and get back before the harvest comes. That means that most of the soldiers who are fighting in these armies are going to be getting poorer, not richer, even though the Republic is getting a ton of money from these conquests. So here's the Roman Republic in 146 BC. From basically here all the way to 14 CE, it's just going to be non-stop expansion. And it's going to be a Mediterranean superpower in the same way that the US today is now a global superpower. I think I only told Lucas what a res publica was. But res publica means public thing. It's very vaguely defined. And, well, it's where the modern word republic comes from. But remember, public thing isn't exactly vague. So, isn't exactly very specific. So, there's going to be a lot of debate and a lot of conflict over just how public should the public thing really be. Also, remember, now the fighting is far away from Italy. Remember in days past, you'd have a farmer soldier. He'd plant all his crops in the spring. Then you'd go over to like some other community, maybe 2 weeks away. That's also in Italy. You go there, maybe steal some sheep, burn some farms down, things like that, and then you come home in time for the harvest. And it's not all that intrusive on your life if you're a farmer. But now, well, you're going to be spending years and years staying or garrisoning Spain and Greece, where, that old soldier farmer ideal isn't really sustainable anymore. So, well, let's get to our first major character of the story, Cornelia. And this is the first Roman woman that we're talking about, and we're 4 weeks into the class. So I'll be talking about why that is later. So Cornelia is the mother of the Gracchi. The Gracchi are our two main characters for the story. There's Tiberius, you've already met him, and there's his younger brother Gaius. So Cornelia is the daughter of Scipio Africanus. Some of you guys remember Scipio Africanus, but he was the guy who beat Hannibal. And I know I'm dropping a lot of names here, but if you remember, Hannibal was the guy who managed to kill 60,000 Romans in one day. So the guy who almost took Rome. So Scipio Africanus is, the big war hero. At this point, he's dead, but the Scipio family is a big deal, and Cornelia is part of that family. And not only that, is that she's extremely well educated, being the daughter of one of the richest men in Rome, and extremely cultured because Scipio Africanus loved the Greeks, and Cornelia gets a lot of Greek education and talks to a lot of Greeks, things like that. And she's so powerful and so influential that the king of Egypt, this guy right here, actually tries to marry her, and she rejects him. Quite the flex. So her husband, also named Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, we're just going to call him Gracchus Senior, died when Tiberius Jr. was 10. And just after his the just after baby Gaius, or well, Gaius, had been born. So that means that Cornelia is pretty much solely responsible for raising her kids. And so what she does is like she doesn't pull her punches here. She hires the best tutors in the known world at the time to go raise her kids, like the best Greek rhetoricians, like mathematicians, things like that. So these kids are extremely well educated. But then what she also does is that she encourages her sons to be ambitious. Because remember, Gracchus Senior, or Tiberius Senior, had been had been the consul twice, so like two-time president, and this whole family has like a very big name to live up to, and so well, remember, like their grandfather is literally Scipio Africanus, their brother-in-law is Scipio Aemilianus, so you can tell, like these people are expected to rise high in the world. And it's said that when Cornelia, when the kids are growing up, Cornelia told them that she was known as the mother-in-law of Scipio Aemilianus, but she was not yet known as the mother of the Gracchi. No, she really, and well, based off of the first line in this story, well, the Gracchi brothers are not going to be disappointing her. So here's why it took 4 weeks to get to our first Roman woman, because Rome was an extremely patriarchal society, and that's one of like the lasting impacts that Rome had on our own society. Though in the wake of the like all these movements towards equality, that's been lessened somewhat. But anyways, Roman women are not respected in Roman history because Roman historians typically have four main archetypes for how they treat Roman women. Because, so for one, there's the passive object kind of woman, where there's like Princess in the Tower, where they don't really do anything. They're just there really as like a plot device for Roman historians. There's then temptresses, people who are like very beautiful and evil and betray everybody, things like that. Think the way that people or that Roman historians treat Cleopatra, if you're familiar with her. There's evil stepmothers who like try to poison anyone who gets in the way of their interests. Think think Cinderella's mom, wicked stepmother, that kind of figure. And but then what Cornelia is that she's this kind of Virgin Mary figure, where she's this mother who's like the peak of what the Romans believed, or how the Romans believed that a woman should act. And that is going to lead to Cornelia's motherly traits, raising her kids and educating them and all that, are very, very exaggerated. So just an idea of like just the huge gender divide in Roman history is that all of our Roman historians, up until Anna Comnene, princess of the Roman Empire, in the 1100s CE are men. So right now we're in 146 BCE. So that's almost 12 1,250 years later, and that's so long. That's so far into the future that that's like 5 United Stateses in terms of time. So yeah, for basically all of Roman history, for just take anything that you hear about any Roman female character with a lot of salt. So, also for another idea of just how marginalized Roman women were, is that they don't even get actual names. They're named after their families. So Cornelia is named after her family, the Cornelii Scipiones. Her daughter, Sempronia, the one who's married to Scipio Aemilianus, is was named Sempronia because they're from the Sempronii Gracchi. And, yeah, the Gracchi brothers do have a sister named Sempronia, but her marriage to, she's married to Emilianus, and that's literally everything that we know about her. And we know more about her than we know about most Roman women. It's really bad. So, when you might be thinking, okay, so if you're named after your family, what happens if you have multiple daughters? So let's take this other guy, Appius Claudius Pulcher. You'll meet him later. He has two daughters, both named Claudia. Yeah. And the thing is, what the Romans did is they literally give their daughters numbers based off of their birth date. So the oldest daughter, she's named Claudia Prima, first Claudia, and the second daughter is Claudia Secunda, second Claudia. So, this is an incredible amount of dehumanization, and it's really gross. The whole reason behind this is because, according to the Romans, women aren't supposed to have a role in politics, and that you don't need to distinguish between them with names because they're not supposed to matter. Well, Cornelia matters, and even though we don't know that much about her, like that's probably real. What we do know is that she is an extremely talented politician, and she sets her sons up with strong political alliances, lots of money, and extremely good educations. So speaking of her sons, let's talk about the young Gracchi brothers. So Tiberius might be 12 years older than Gaius or 10 years older than Gaius. It's all very mixed. So, all right. So the young Gracchi brothers are plebeians. That's pretty much meaningless at this point. But they're also nobiles, top of the Roman social ladder. Extremely distinguished father, two consulships. And the thing about Roman nobles is that their whole life is all based around competition, because they are taught from a very young age to be special. They're taught that they are not only Romans, that means they've conquered the Mediterranean, but also that they're Roman nobiles. They are the future generation to steer the ship of the Republic. And, well, they need to live up to their status. Because here's just an idea of just how competitive Roman life is. Whenever a Roman noble dies, they'd make a mask of his face, and then they'd add that mask to a family collection of all of the masks of all of that family's men. And at his funeral, they'd put all of these masks from the family, and they'd have them all stare down at the casket, like the dead noble is being judged by his ancestors. Like, is he worthy to be among this old distinguished ancestor who'd been consul? Or, maybe are these young Gracchi brothers, when they die, will they be able to go into the afterlife and talk to their ancestors and feel that they belong with this distinguished company? It is very competitive. And this family, though, so the reason why it's expected that they're going to rise high is because the Gracchus family has a ton of clients. Remember, the clients are the people where, let's say that you're just some Roman, I don't know, tanner. Every day in the morning, you go to your patron. In this case, that'd be like, say, Tiberius. You go to your patron's house. Tiberius would give you a bit of money, and then in exchange, you vote for Tiberius. You follow him around to give him like moral support and physical support and things like that. Maybe you'll join his gang, and yeah, that's going to be happening now. And so that means that if you have a lot of clients, which is pretty expensive to maintain since you're giving them money all day or every day, that means that you're going to have a lot of power just built up. And that's power that your kids are going to inherit. That means that combined with this extremely good education and this extremely formidable mother, that these Gracchi boys are expected to go far. So let's just get into young Tiberius, or Tiberius as a young man. So, well, he's extremely talented due to his education and just to, well, talent. He's extremely well connected. Remember, grandson of Scipio Africanus, uh, well, brother-in-law to Scipio Aemilianus. And then after he comes home from the fall of Carthage, he's going to be the son-in-law of Appius Claudius Pulcher. But anyways, let's go back a bit to the fall of Carthage, because he was brought along in the army as just a junior officer, but he was, it was just a relatively low-level job. But he actually did a very good job. He was, he showed himself. I quote, he showed himself to be a brave and intelligent leader, and that he said to have been very popular with his soldiers. And remember, he might have been the first man over the walls of Carthage when the assault came. That's the mural crown. It's the same one that was won by Aemilianus in Spain, and the one won by Frank Strong in the Son of Neptune. We don't know if we know that he got the mural crown, but we don't know if that actually came in the final assault or if that had been in one of the other assaults. But Tiberius Gracchus, and his brother Gaius would swear for their whole lives that it was over the final assault. It was during the final assault. But remember, even though he's super talented in all of this, he's not. This isn't exactly an especially unorthodox, or this isn't an especially special political career just yet. This is pretty normal for rich kids in Rome. So when he comes home, he gets married to, well, the daughter. Well, I think this is Claudia Prima, the first daughter of Appius Claudius Pulcher. And so Claudius Pulcher is a patrician. He's from the Claudii family. We've met them before, and before they'd been very, where, yeah, we've met them before, and I'm not really going to get into them. But, just to suffice to say is that they're a very powerful family, and Claudius Pulcher is one of the two most powerful men in Rome, next to, well, Scipio Aemilianus. And he's Scipio Aemilianus's big rival. And so Tiberius Gracchus is now in the middle of this. He's the son-in-law of Claudius Pulcher and the brother-in-law of Scipio Aemilianus. Very, very well connected. So, here's just something we gotta know. Is that at this point, Rome has been embroiled in fighting in Spain. This is Spain, for several generations now, since the days of fighting against Hannibal, and that had been more than 50 years before our present story. And a lot of this fighting had been mainly for silver deposits held by Spanish tribes. And remember, Spain is not one country at this point. It's a bunch of different tribes and states and kingdoms, things like that. And, well, the wars in Spain are incredibly brutal, and they are guerrilla conflicts. Some of you guys knew what guerrilla conflicts were in that live lecture, but for those of you guys who don't know, guerrilla conflicts are wars that aren't fought in big battles. They're fought in ambushes and today with a war in Afghanistan through road bombings, things like that. And it's all a bunch of raids, and it's very brutal and tends to kill a lot of people who aren't soldiers. If you ever study world history later, Spain is filled with these kinds of guerrilla conflicts because it's very mountainous, which makes it very hard to organize these large armies and get them to control all this different territory. Just it's so hard to move around. So the war in Spain is kind of like a modern war in Afghanistan, or the wars in Spain. Because if you guys don't know this, right now we're living in the longest war in U.S. history, the war in Afghanistan. It's been 20 years now, to the point where I knew this guy whose dad had been a vet who had fought in Afghanistan during the initial invasion, and a few years ago he had actually been fighting in Afghanistan, just like his dad had. So, you know, we're engaged in a very similar multi-generational conflict to the Romans. But anyways, the war in Spain is pretty much completely unnecessary because well, it's marked by a lot of incompetence on behalf of the Roman commanders and a lot of duplicity in the sense that there's all these Roman commanders who are coming to Spain every year and they want to boost their political careers. And what's a better way to boost your political career than to win a war, steal some silver deposits, steal a lot of the silver, and then use that to fund your campaigns while, you bask in the glory of victory. And that means the thing is though is that the Spanish tribes didn't really want to fight the Romans. Like the Spanish were being pretty nice to the Romans in general. Like after the end of the war with Hannibal, where there was just some trade, things like that. But here's the thing: is that when you can't actually get the Spanish to attack you, you just have to make something up. Think of the way that the Bush administration basically made up the idea of that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, like nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, prior to the invasion of Iraq in 2003. It's very similar. Where let's say that there was some kind of robbery, you can then say with absolutely no proof, if you're a Roman commander, that this robbery was conducted by a bunch of Spanish tribes, and then use that to declare war on them. Other things that happen is the Spanish and the Romans come to a bunch of peace parties, things like that, and then what the Roman commanders do is that they literally just kill everybody at the party, or every Spanish noble at the party. It's very brutal, and the Romans like to always say that they're very honorable in all of this. But this entire series of wars is all for the sake of, greed. And so, who has to pay for this? It's not really the commanders, though, some commanders die, like this guy right here who has been stabbed by a spear. It's oftentimes... sorry, my throat. It's mainly the soldiers who have to do this. Remember, these soldiers are soldier farmers. And remember, Spain is very far away from Rome. So they have to spend then, years away from their farms. And that's years where you're not planting anything, you're not harvesting anything, so you're not making any money, and you're not, maintaining you're not maintaining your farm. You probably have to pay someone else to feed your animals and everything. And so that means that usually let's say you spent 6 years fighting in Spain, then you come home to a farm that's overgrown with weeds, and you have no money to actually, repair the thing, since army pay is extremely low, and chances are that like army pay at this time is low, even if you get paid as much as you're supposed to. But what happens is that since Spain is so far away, and since communication is so difficult, and because there's so much corruption, is that soldiers actually only end up getting paid half the time, really, if they're lucky. So that means that you're totally broke. And what are you going to do? You have no money to repair your farm. Your farm can't make any money since it's ruined. And so what you do is you just sell that to some senator who has a lot of money, and then maybe just try to get a job somewhere else. And so that basically means that these soldiers, as a reward for fighting and dying for the Republic in Spain, they get to they get to lose the land that their family had spent centuries on. And these are the lucky soldiers, because the unlucky ones, they die. Because this war in Spain, as you can see here, is extremely brutal. There are massive losses to these constant attacks, and there are also, because these Roman commanders don't know what they're doing, and also just to disease and accidents and things like that. There's one army where in their first year in Spain, like half the army had been lost to disease because, well, these soldiers aren't used to diseases in Spain. So yeah, there are massive losses here. And the commanders, they can reap like all the benefits. They can, steal all the silver, all that, and they can come home to like a glorious triumph and all that. But their soldiers just come home in, well, body bags. This wars in Spain, um, it's, I mean, it's honestly just like a tragedy for pretty much everyone involved. Pretty much everyone involved. So so the, here's a map of the Roman Republic and later Roman Empire. Right now we're in, well, 133 BC, I guess. So we're not really 133 BC yet. But here's just like, think that this pink and the red is what the Roman Republic looks like right now. So this is a bit generous, this map, because the Roman control might extend over this whole area, or Roman like control might technically spread over this whole area. But remember, Spain is mountainous, and the Spanish don't really like the Romans. Like, we wouldn't like them either, considering what they've been doing. So control of Spain is mainly limited to the coast, and the resistance against the Romans is mainly based around this one city in Spain, Numantia, and right around here. And this area is where most of the fighting is taking place. So Numantia is sitting over on top of like a ton of silver deposits. And we're going to meet Numantia pretty soon. So while this horrible, horrible series of wars is going on, the tribunes of the plebs, remember, they're the ones who can like veto things, arrest people, like propose laws, things like that. Their whole job is to protect the people, and the people in this case are the soldiers. And so in this case, they're going to be doing their jobs actually, because, well, this has to be addressed. And so the tribunes of the plebs at this point have begun installing secret ballots. And the whole reason why this is so important is because prior to this, if you were going to vote for or against a law, you'd have to vote like in front of everybody. Like, you'd have to vote. Your patron would be able to tell whether or not you're voting as they're telling you to do. And so let's say that this patron is voting on a platform for more war in Spain. And let's say you don't want that. But if you vote against him, then, well, you can say goodbye to the money and the food and the protection that he's been giving you. What actually even happens is that the tribunes of the plebs actually imprison consuls in 151 and 138, or so like twice, in order to stop excessive conscription. So what conscription is that, let's say you need 10,000 soldiers to fight this war in Spain, but only 2,000 people actually volunteer, since, who actually wants to do this? So for these other 8,000 people, what you need to do is you just get some guy with a list of Roman citizens, and then he just goes down the list, like selecting people at random. And then if that guy, selects you at random, then you just have to go to Spain in order to fight and die for the Republic. Like, it's forcing you to fight, and for a lot of people, die. So, it's pretty terrible. And what's also happening at this point is that since all these farms are getting ruined due to spending all these years on campaign, that means that the number of people that you can actually recruit from is getting lower and lower and lower. So if you have enough property for this, chances that you're going to be drafted are getting higher and higher and higher. And so that's a huge amount of stress on all these people who don't want to be fighting these wars. But these wars are continuing. Oh yeah, just a note about the secret ballots is that these secret ballots don't overnight destroy the influence of patrons. Because remember, these patrons are still paying you, and you know them, so chances are that you still are probably still going to be voting for them. It's just that this is just going to start the process of chipping away at the Senate or at the upper class's power. So let's get to Tiberius Gracchus. He's now 29 years old. He gets elected to his first government office. He's a quaestor. Um, this is just like the first rung on the whole like chain of the government, well, the whole government ladder, where you're going to be like a quaestor, and then after that maybe you can be a praetor, and then after that you can finally reach the consulship. But anyways, Tiberius, his job is to like control pay and things like that, control supplies for an army that's going to be fighting in Spain. So he gets sent off with this army under one of the consuls for the year. And it's for fighting against Numantia, one of the Spanish tribes. But this consul is really terrible because he has no clue how to run an army. He doesn't know how to lead battles. So he runs into Numantine territory, fights a bunch of skirmishes with the Numantines, which he loses all of them. Then when he realizes that he's made a mistake, he tries to retreat back to Roman territory, but he mismanages that too. They travel too slowly, and they don't send proper scouts. So that means that they eventually get surrounded by the Numantines. So now there are 30,000 men who are like hopelessly surrounded by a massive enemy army. So at this point, the Romans have to try to come to some agreement so they don't all die. So the Numantines before, they'd actually fought a previous war with Tiberius's father, also named Tiberius. And the thing is, Tiberius, the senior, had been, fair and honest with his dealings, and he'd given them a pretty nice treaty. So the Numantines think that, okay, hopefully the father has taught the son well, and the son is also going to be fair and honest. And so Tiberius, at the tender age of just 29, goes alone into the Numantine camp and negotiates a treaty or a peace where he says the Romans are going to go leave and they're going to have peace for several years as long as you let the army leave. And so the Numantines, they say, okay, Tiberius, we believe you because, well, you seem like a pretty decent guy and because you're smart and all that. And so Tiberius, actually, at the age of 29, manages to save 30,000 Roman lives. Quite the achievement. But here's the thing. The Romans actually don't really like this. At least the Roman Senate doesn't. Because the Romans have this belief that they should always win. You should only get applause if you win. So what the Senate actually does is they say, well, Tiberius, you suck. You're supposed to go out in a blaze of glory and, just die fighting the Spanish. This defeat isn't allowed. And so all these senators in the Senate House are actually telling Tiberius, they're condemning Tiberius because he saved 30,000 men just because he didn't, fight and win, or fight and die in this case. And this actually almost ends Tiberius's political career because now there's all these senators who aren't going to be giving him their backing. And well, that's extremely important since all these senators have clients. But here's the thing. When Tiberius leaves the Senate House from what one Roman historian called a tongue lashing, he finds a massive crowd of all the families of these soldiers that Tiberius had saved. And, well, they cheer him. And this is going to kind of define Tiberius's life, where from now on, he's really going to be a supporter of the people, not these stupid senators who are expecting him to basically commit suicide for the sake of glory. So the Roman Senate, because it's just so honorable, they are like, okay, we're not allowed to lose a war. well, yeah, we're not allowed to lose a war. We are Rome. Rome doesn't lose things. It's the same way that Americans insist that the U.S. has never lost a war, even though Vietnam happened. Uh, and so the Roman Senate drudges up, like they invalidate the peace treaty, and then they start the war again. Remember, they literally just broke the peace treaty that allowed 30,000 men to live and go free. And that's so much for Roman honor. This is also followed by 2 years of completely useless fighting, with thousands of Roman soldiers dead because the Senate can't swallow its pride, and nothing changes. Uh, so, well, what are we gonna do? Well, it turns out that there is, if only there were some war hero who actually knows what he's doing, who can end the war really quickly and let some of these soldiers go home. Well, it just seems like maybe 12 years ago there was some general named Scipio Aemilianus who managed to beat Carthage very methodically. And so the thing is, though, is that Scipio Aemilianus had been consul once in 146 when he destroyed Carthage. And for reasons I'm not going to get into, he's not supposed to be able to actually hold a second consulship at this point. But what happens is that since Scipio Aemilianus is so popular, the assembly actually votes him an exemption. This is, well, under normal circumstances, this would be illegal, and this is just stomping all over like law and tradition. Like you don't pass a law and then immediately go, except for this guy. But, well, Aemilianus is popular. Who cares? And his whole platform is that, one, he's going to end the war quickly because he actually knows what he's doing. And two is that he's going to severely decrease the amount of people that you have to conscript. And what he does is he says that instead he's going to recruit his army from his own clients. And he actually recruits 4,000 soldiers just from his own clients. Like, that is an incredible amount of money. Remember, that's like 4,000 soldiers means like upwards, that's like at least 4,000 families that he's providing for. So this sets two bad precedents. So the first one is that he used the mob in order to get himself an exemption from the law. He pretty much did the same thing, if you remember, to get the command in 146. Back then, he'd been too young to be the consul. And then, so his second thing that he does, or the second bad precedent that he sets, is that he literally recruits a private army. Remember, these are his clients. And that means that these soldiers are going to be loyal to Scipio Aemilianus, not to the Roman Republic. So for a similar modern day example, take PMCs. I don't know if you guys have heard, though none of the kids in the live lecture did. So PMCs, it means a private military corporation or private military contractor. And it means basically that you hire some dude to fight in your army, regardless of whether or not he's whether or not he's in the U.S. military. Where these guys are fighting for pay, not for, any ideas of protecting or serving and protecting the American people. And the thing is, though, the advantage of PMCs is that it's just politically much easier. Remember, for Scipio Aemilianus, every soldier that he recruits from his clients is one soldier who doesn't have to be forced out of his farm. Also, it doesn't really matter if a PMC dies, because, he's not an American soldier. That's very callous and all, but politically, you don't have to talk about why, let's say, like 20 American soldiers died. If 20 PMCs died, well, they're not American soldiers. Who cares? And so, if you ever hear about troop deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan today, take the number of soldiers that are like deployed, and then multiply that by 4, because for every American soldier in Iraq, there are 3 private contractors. Because, well, let's say that there are 10,000 American soldiers. Well, there's actually going to be 40,000 American soldiers. Uh, so that means that there are now, well, say most of the U.S. Army in Iraq isn't really being held responsible by the government, and where they don't really care about doing a great job or anything, or actually doing, well, like, conforming to ethical standards of behavior. They just want to get rich. So both of these things are very troubling developments. Like, for Rome, because private army equals very easy civil war, while for the US today, the PMC means that there's very little accountability for soldiers who commit war crimes, or basically, like, for the US government itself, since no one cares what's happening in Iraq and Afghanistan, since it's not American soldiers who are dying. Oh yeah. So, by the way, Tiberius's younger brother Gaius is actually going to be part of Scipio Aemilianus's army as a junior officer, basically the same way that Tiberius had been in the war, or had been part of the Carthaginian campaign. So over the next year, Scipio Aemilianus is going to, well, win the war against Numantia. But Numantia is only one Spanish tribe, so so much for. And, well, he's going to do a good job for one tribe, but these Spanish wars are going to continue. So that is where we're going to end for today, with a war, a series of this, not like completely awful, useless, well, greedy wars in Spain, a general who's now pretty much above the law, and the recruitment of a private army. While at home in Rome, there's a huge amount of poverty, while Roman senators are making huge amounts of money while not taking care of the people they're supposed to represent. Yeah, thank you. This was a very long lecture. Sorry for that, but hopefully you found it interesting. You can email me for any questions. And, well, yeah, thank you, and bye-bye.